Few minutes for Q&A, and I want to get your questions in. I've got a couple myself. A very well-deserved standing ovation. The work you both do is so needed and so wonderful. At the end of the film, Lupita, your team was asked, your group was asked, what are your hopes for the next 5 years? And we didn't get a chance to hear from you. So I want to know what your hopes are in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest hopes for Radical Monarchs is, like one of my other Radical Monarch sisters said, is to have every girl of color should get this chance to learn about social justice. So I really want this to expand. And as we're launching more troops, I feel like my dream is coming true. So I think.
Yeah. Anna Yvette, I want to ask you, what does it mean for you to be a queer woman of color, leading these youth and really imparting on them the wisdom that you've learned and really helping them go out into the world to be radical?
Yeah. I think the Radical Monarchs is so deeply informed by both me and Marilyn and our experiences as queer women of color growing up. And we've often said, this is the group that we wish existed when we were young, right? And I think that a lot of folks, when they hear about us, are like, oh man, I was in this other group, but I wish I had this. So it deeply informs what we do and how we do what we do, both with the girls and also as we build our organization. I think that we spend a lot of time being intentional. Radical Monarchs is deeply informed by past movements, but we're really about evolving those movements. How are those movements replicating, patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and how are we, evolving beyond that? And how are we also implementing self-care and self-love, which was really lacking in a lot of old movements, so.
How many of you would join the adult Radical Monarchs group today? Yeah. You, again, I said earlier, you impart so much wisdom on these girls. What have they taught you? Because these are some of the most informed young girls that I've ever heard.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that these monarchs teach me and Marilyn is to cultivate the importance of cultivating joy, right? And I think that this is something that's really big right now and that's really pivotal and really important for our movement is that, we're living in really ugly, hard times, and it's really important to balance that out with radical joy. So we talk a lot about that, and it's impossible to not feel joyful around the monarchs because they are so fun and they are so playful, and so it inspires us to really want to embody that more. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned from them.
Radical joy.
Yes.
Do you guys have any questions for these two? Got any questions in the audience there? I saw a hand go up back there. So the question was, have you received further funding?
Thank you for that question. Our biggest foundation grant to date is still the Novo Foundation. So we are still in search of a big multi-year grant. We have received some smaller grants, but not enough to sustain us and to help us grow. So we are currently very much still hitting the pavement looking for big multi-year grants. So if you know anybody, please point them to our direction.
Yeah. And where is that direction? Where can they be pointed to?
So we have a website, radicalmonarchs.org. You can also email us, radicalmonarchs@gmail.com. Those are the best ways to get in contact with us.
Awesome. Have any more questions out there? I saw a couple hands go up. Got one right there in the middle. Those two girls, sitting there. Oh, okay.
How did it come together?
Okay, so we had two. I'm going to go with the one right here first, and then we'll go to that one. Okay. So we'll do a list of the badges, and then we'll answer your question about how they came together too.
Yeah, so we have, for troop number 1, we have 12 badges. So we have Radical Roots, Black Lives Matter, Radical Healing, Radical Love, Radical Bodies, Radical Pride, Radical Entrepreneurship, Radical Coding, Radical Advocacy, Radical Media. Am I missing? I think that's it. Yeah. That's it.
And then maybe you can answer the next question there. How did the troop kind of form and come together?
Yeah, it was inspired by Lupita, so it was inspired by my daughter. That's really how it came together. And the first troop was really comprised of her friends and of people in the neighborhood, our friends, who had, young girls who were interested in, kind of joining a group like this. So our work is really grounded in working with young people, right? I think that it's imperative, though, that, adults have spaces where we can heal, where we can work this out. And so I encourage folks, if they're inspired by the Radical Monarch, and what we've created, that there's definitely a way in which adults can create spaces like that for themselves, where whether or not they earn badges or not, that's up to you. But where you can have conversations about these topics that we talk about, right? Because these topics still impact us, as adults, are layered, are intersectional, right? So we don't only talk about Black Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter badge. We don't only talk about trans identity and the Pride unit. These conversations intersect in our identities, in our society. And so we're very cognizant of how that affects the young girls we're working with and even us as the adults that are working with them. And so I think just creating spaces like that with like-minded other folks of color, women of color, where we can heal and talk to each other and help coach each other, because we're not finding that in the larger, in larger society. So we have to create those spaces for ourselves. It's really, I think, what it comes down to.
Oh, yes. Like my mom said, I think also having allyship is something that's really important. We talk a lot about that on Radical Monarchs, specifically for adults, like just something you can do even if you don't have these spaces for yourselves and your friends, but listening to the youth and creating these spaces for us, because a lot of times we don't have the resources to create these spaces, and you guys can help us by using your allyship and advocating for us, because a lot of times we can't do that ourselves.
I think for me, just being a part of this film festival also is supporting films like this and supporting filmmakers and subjects that are on the front line and doing this work. So again, make sure, to support them in their work and go check out that website after. So I've got time for about one more question. Let's see. Oh, all right there, yep. So they wanted to know
that was going to come.
Yeah, are there any Radical Monarch troops in Toronto? I did see in the film there was somebody from Toronto that popped up on social. Yeah. Are you here? No.
Not yet. But we have gotten requests from here. So you're definitely on our radar, and we should definitely talk if there are folks that are interested, in forming a troop. We've recently gone through our strategic planning process and developed a community cost structure for folks who want to launch their own troop and become their own troop leaders. And so it took us a while to kind of come to that. We were at first trying to expand more traditionally, but we realized we're like, if we do it this way, it's going to take us forever to get to people, and it's not sustainable for us as co-founders. We were doing way too much of the work, and so we're like, how do we condense this and give it to the community so they can kind of really take it and take ownership over it and have troops. So definitely check out our website for more info. And so yeah.
And they'll be sticking around, guys.
Yeah.
So you can come down and have some one-on-one time with them after this. I have to wrap it up. Thank you so much again for sticking around and for supporting films and individuals like this on the front line. So thank you guys so much.
Oh, make sure to vote for us for the Audience Award.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Toronto.